You know, have you ever just stopped and wondered, where do really good ideas come from? I'm not talking about just a clever thought, but one of those big ones, the kind that actually changes the world. Well, today, we're going to dig into that, using Stephen Johnson's incredible book, Where Good Ideas Come From, as our guide.
I mean, it's a huge question, right? It gets to the very heart of how we as a species move forward. Is innovation just pure luck, a random bolt of lightning from the blue? Or is it something we can actually get better at, something we can grow?
We've all heard the stories, that flash of insight or the spark of genius, the big eureka moment. We absolutely love this image of the lonely inventor toiling away in a lab until, bam, a light bulb just appears over their head. But what if that whole story is mostly a myth?
And this quote from Johnson, it just completely flips that script. He says, we are often better served by connecting ideas than we are by protecting them. Think about that. It suggests that real innovation isn't about locking your idea away in a vault. It's about letting it out into the world to bump into other ideas. It's about connection, not protection.
So what if the secret isn't locked up inside our heads at all? What if it's actually out there, in our surroundings? This is the core idea of the book. The most creative places on Earth, and we're talking about everything from coral reefs to bustling cities to the internet itself, they all seem to follow the same rules. And yeah, sure, our ideas shape our environment, but what's really fascinating is how our environment shapes our ideas right back.
So, how do these special, innovative environments actually work? Well, the first big idea we need to wrap our heads around is something called the adjacent possible. It's a really powerful way to think about the limits and the amazing potential of any new breakthrough.
Think of it like this. Innovation isn't about making some giant, impossible leap into the future. It's about opening the next door. The adjacent possible is basically all the rooms you can get to from where you are right now. You couldn't invent a microwave in the 1600s, right? Because the doors to electricity and vacuum tubes just hadn't been opened yet. They weren't in the adjacent possible.
And this leads to this amazing concept of tinkering, or as the book calls it, bricolage. Breakthroughs are rarely built from thin air. They're usually cobbled together from the spare parts of older ideas that are just lying around. There's this famous story of an infant incubator designed for developing countries. It was built using ordinary car parts so that any local mechanic could fix it. That's a perfect, beautiful example of exploring the adjacent possible.
Okay, so if ideas are built from these spare parts, then the next obvious question is, what kind of place lets all those parts mix and mingle and connect? The answer is a network. But it turns out not just any kind of network will do the trick.
This is such a great way to visualize it. If your network is like a gas, think scattered tribes, ideas are just too far apart to ever connect. If it's a solid, like a super rigid top-down company, ideas are locked in place and can't move. The sweet spot, the magic state, is liquid. A liquid network is dense enough for ideas to constantly bump into each other, but fluid enough for them to flow and form new, surprising combinations.
And you can actually see this play out in human history. For tens of thousands of years, progress was incredibly slow. Then farming came along, and people started to settle down. But when the first cities popped up, the first real large-scale liquid networks, the rate of innovation just went through the roof. Why? Because ideas were suddenly spilling over everywhere. You couldn't stop them from mixing. All right, so we've got the right environment, a liquid network. But what about the ideas themselves? To get that, we kind of have to throw out our old notions of how a big idea is even born.
So what about that light bulb moment, that sudden stroke of genius we were talking about? Well, the book argues it almost never, ever happens that way.
The reality is that great ideas almost always start out as what Johnson calls a slow hunch. It's just a vague feeling, an incomplete thought. It might float around in the back of your mind for years, even decades, just waiting to connect with another piece of the puzzle, another hunch. You know, Charles Darwin didn't just wake up one day with the theory of evolution fully formed. It was a slow hunch that took him decades to piece together. And if ideas are really these slow hunches just waiting for a connection, then it makes total sense that the process isn't going to be neat and tidy. In fact, it turns out that some of our best ideas depend on chance, on messiness, and on what you might call happy accidents.
First up is serendipity. That's what happens when you make an unplanned but brilliant connection. It's when your slow hunch accidentally bumps into someone else's slow hunch at a coffee shop, or when you're reading a book about something totally unrelated and it suddenly gives you the missing piece to a problem you've been stuck on for months.
And you know what? Sometimes the very best discoveries come from getting something completely wrong. Take the pacemaker. It was invented because an engineer grabbed the wrong resistor by mistake. Instead of just recording a heartbeat, his new device started creating one. That one little mistake opened a brand new door in the adjacent possible that nobody had even seen before.
And then there's this really cool idea from biology called exaptation. It's basically when nature takes something that evolved for one job and hijacks it for a totally different one. Feathers probably first evolved to keep dinosaurs warm, but later they were exapted for flight. For us, think about the punch cards that were invented to run weaving looms. They were later exapted to program the very first computers. Mind blown, right?
So, here's the big takeaway. How do we actually use all of this? How do we build these kinds of fertile, creative environments in our own lives? Well, the book suggests we can literally build our own personal coral reef for ideas.
And the ways to do it are actually pretty simple. Go for more walks. It's been shown to help connect ideas. Pay attention to those slow hunches and nurture them. Write everything down, but don't be too neat about it. A little messiness helps you rediscover things later. Be okay with making mistakes. Pick up a few different hobbies so you can borrow ideas from one to the other. And most importantly, put yourself in those liquid networks. Go to the coffee shop, join an online group, just get out there.
In the end, it really all comes down to this one beautiful phrase. The tangled bank was a metaphor Darwin used to describe a rich, messy, interconnected ecosystem. And that's the lesson. To be more innovative, we shouldn't be trying to build a sterile, perfectly organized laboratory. We should be trying to build a tangled bank, a space where ideas are rich, connected, and always colliding and evolving. Because that, it turns out, is where good ideas have always come from.